फेरि पनि म त्यही च्याप्टरको चाहिँ अर्को पार्ट प्राइभेटाइजेसन लिएर आइसकेको छु। कन्सेप्टतिर जाऊ प्राइभेटाइजेसनको। द ट्रान्सफर अफ ओनरसिप property or business from the government to private sector is termed privatization. The government ceases to be the owner of entity or business. Second number, the process in which a publicly traded economic company is taken over by a few people is also called privatization. The stock of the company is no longer traded in the stock market, and the general public is here from holding a stake in such a company. The company gives up the name limited and start using private limited in its last name. Its main goals are enhancing productivity, effective resource allocation, and resource government from budgetary burden. In Nepal, privatization effects were instituted in early 1990s. From sixth plan, it is a part of public sector reform or sector adjustment program. In Nepal, altogether 30 public enterprises have been privatized till date. Privatized till date. Privatization Act 1994. This act defined privatization as involving private sector in the management of the enterprises, or to sell or lease it or transfer government ownership to the private sector or workers or the resource group, either whole or partially. The main features of this act are as follows. Formation of Privatization Committee, power, function and duties of the committee, process of privatization, evaluation and proposal, settlement of dispute, control of present workers, liquidation of enterprises. Formulation of Privatization Committee. A privatization committee is formed to organize the privatization enterprises under chairmanship of the minister or state minister for finance. The committee may invite the chief of enterprises, labor representatives, and any distinguished economist in its meeting. Second question, powers, function and duties of committee. To recommend programs and priorities of privatization, to conduct a study or research in order to formulate privatization program, to evaluate the enterprise and recommend to the government, to remove hindrances faced in the privatization program, to follow up the decision and agreements relating to privatization. To follow up the decision and agreements relating to privatization, to constitute subcommittees as may be necessary. Process of privatization, sale of shares, formulation of corporate cooperatives, selling assets of the enterprise, leasing out of assets of the enterprise, involving private sector in the management of the enterprises, adopting any other modalities modalities considered appropriate by the government on the basis of the recommendation of the committee. 4 evaluation of proposal. It is carried out on the following basis: attractive price management of the enterprises without changing its nature, retention of the service of parents, workers and employees, enhancing of the employment opportunity, managerial experience, expansion of the enterprises and business by the preparing a good business plan and making additional investment. 5 goes our settlement of dispute. If any dispute arises, it is resolved through mutual conciliation among the concerned parties. Or 6 goes our continuity of present workers. The government may ensure the continuity of service of the present workers of the enterprises to be privatized. Number 7 goes liquidation enterprises. The government can dissolve whole wind enterprises by publishing a notification in Nepal Gazette. All areas due to the enterprises liquidated are recovering as government duties. The government may transfer the assets and liabilities of the enterprise liquidated to any other body. If all liability of the enterprises could not be fully settled from the assets of enterprises, the resale liabilities can be settled according to existing law. Method of privatization. A number of methods are adopted for privatization. They are share sales. This method of privatization involves the transfer of shares to the general public, employee and private organization. A number of methods can be applied and they are: first method, block sales share, block sales of shares, public offering of the shares, sale of shares to employees, sale of shares to investment fund, combination of the above method. In Nepal, some of the public enterprises privatized under this method were Nepal Film Industry Limited, Balaju Textile Industry, Nepal Ruby Oil Limited and Nepal Telecom Company. अब B को रहेको छ management contract. Under this method, management right of the enterprise are transferred for a temporary period in return for a price and exclusive of property rights. The main objective of this to enhance the efficiency and productivity of the enterprise. This method of privatization was used for Viratnagar Jute Mills Company Limited. Sequential lease assist. This is transfer of the benefiting rights of the assets to be the private sector, known as contractor, for a specified period and in return for a price. This method was used to private Privatize Bhaktapur brick factory, Lumini sugar factory, and Nepal resin and turpentine limited. त्यसैगरी D को रहेको छ assessed sales. Here the population and service units and other assets of enterprises are transferred to the private sector in return for a price. Assets are sold through public action. Some examples are Birikuti paper factory, Hari Siddhi bricks and tile factory limited, and Banswari leather and shoes factory limited. Business sales. This is the transfer of total ownership of a public enterprises to the private sector. It involves the transfer of total assets of the public enterprise to the private sector. Some example: Birikuti paper factory, Hadisiddhi bricks and tile factory limited, and Banswani leather and shoes factory limited. F number others. The others method of privatization include liquidation and retaining. अब हामी जाने अर्को टपिकमा जुन चाहिँ लिबरलाइजेसन लिबरलाइजेसनमा हामी जाने हो अब Economic liberalization refers to open up a country to rest of the world with regards to trade, regulation, taxation and other areas that generally affect the business sector. Economic liberalization is the gradual process of loosening government regulation and restriction in the economic and opening the economy to the world. The goal is to maintain or increase economic competitiveness by encouraging private sector on a competitive basis by reducing government interference. Liberalization can be achieved through empowering the private sector, privatizing government-owned enterprises, deregulation and de-licensing, and curtailing grant and subsidy provided by the government to different sectors of the economy. Liberalization policy is based on assumption that private sector are so efficient than public sector. In Nepal, the liberalization policy were mainly implemented from the 1990 with predominant emphasis on privatization and open market policy. After the adoption of this policy, a new industrial policy was enacted in 1992, which abolished the licensing system, giving priority to the promotion of export-oriented industry, and subsidies on fertilizer, industrial goods and services were reduced. Different acts and policy were formulated and implemented as parts of liberalization process. Some of them are Industrial Policy 2010, Foreign Investment Policy 2050, Labour Act 2070 and Tourism Policy 2008. केवल हामी यसको टोटल कुरा यहाँ डिटेलमै पढौं। यो चाहिँ छ liberalization, requirement of liberalization. Role of the government as facilitator. The government brings policy and structural reforms to facilitate the private sector. It also support private sector by building necessary infrastructure. Increase role of private sector. The assumption is private sector is more ethical than the government and has better managerial and decision making capacity. Policy and reforms focus on development of the private sector. Securing license requirements. Liberalization demand abusing license requirement is most of the industrial. The Industrial Enterprise Act 2016 has specified some industrial requiring permission. They are industrial related to security, currency, and tobacco. Most of the other industrial do not require license. Decades of freedom in business decision. The market factor determine price based on principle of demand and supply. The business sector is the free to fix the price of goods and service. Removal of restriction. Liberalization requires removal and restriction on the movement of goods and services within and between countries. Reduction of tax rate. Under liberalization, the government gradually reduced tax rate to encourage private investment. Execution